Hi, my name is Niall. I'm from Top Floor Systems Limited, the maker of Letman software for rental markets. If you rent a home in Ireland or you are a landlord that rents one out, then you need to know that the rule book has completely changed over the last 20 years. Do you still think in terms of a 12-month lease? In other words, do you think that the landlord can recover possession of the property at the end of a 12-month lease, or that the rent is changed on foot of a new lease? If you still think like that, then you need to watch the video. So here's how we're going to break things down. First, we're going to explain why things got so confusing in the first place. Then we're going to discuss the massive change that is now unlimited tenancies. Then we're going to discuss what the lease is for if it doesn't set the term. And then we're going to discuss how the rent has changed. And finally, we'll put it all together in a new rental strategy for you, the tenant, or you, the landlord. But first off, if you find Irish rental law confusing, then you are not alone. It is not you, it is the system, and it has become incredibly complex, and it's a big headache for everybody involved. You have the Residential Tenancy Board, which is a state agency, and then within and around that you have moderators and adjudicators and tribunals. It's its own legal system, really. And then outside of that you have threshold giving advice, property professionals and solicitors. So you will get conflicting advice, and that leaves the users of the legislation, which is landlords and tenants, at a real disadvantage. So let's get to it basically. Unlimited tenancies. This should completely transform renting in Ireland. We are talking about a complete change from a limited tenancy to one that is unlimited. And this is the new normal. So for any new tenancy that began after June the 11th, 2022, after 6 months of occupation, the tenant is entitled to a tenancy of unlimited duration. Security of tenure for tenants is stronger now than it has ever been. Now, what's really interesting is that this didn't just happen overnight. You can see a clear trend here. It started back in 2004 when the Part 4 tenancy was introduced that granted a tenancy for up to 4 years. Then in 2016, this was bumped up to 6 years. And finally, in 2022, we took the big leap to an unlimited duration for all new tenancies. The next part is crucial. To get your head around the new system, you have to unlearn what you think a lease is. So for decades, we understood that the lease set the term of the tenancy and that the new one set the new rent. So let's update that understanding now. The old assumption that a 12-month lease sets the length of the tenancy is just wrong. The new reality is the tenancy is unlimited. The second myth, that you need a new lease to change the rent, that is gone too. Rent is now changed through a completely separate legal notice. In fact, a new tenancy with new tenants must still reference the old rent. So there are 4 separate pillars you need to understand. The first is that tenancy, which is the fundamental right to live in the home, is now unlimited. And this right can exist without a lease or a document. Second, there is this lease, and it is a contract, and there are rules, and such as no pets and no smoking, etc. Then comes this idea of a fixed term, and if it's confusing, it tends to be because people still think of it as the term of the tenancy. It's not. As tenancies are now unlimited, this fixed term can only be considered as an optional clause for additional security. So the best way of thinking of it is the fixed term is extra security tucked inside your bigger unlimited tenancy. So for an agreed period, let's say a year, the tenant promises not to leave and the landlord promises not to end the tenancy, which they're still entitled to do in special circumstances like selling up. So it gives both sides extra security, but, and this is the key part, it does not set an end date for the tenancy itself. Then there's the rent review. This is a totally separate legal process that is required to change the rent. So if signing a new lease is not the way to change the rent, how is the rent changed? This brings us to the modern legally defined process as the rent review. And burn this number into your brain. Any landlord wanting to increase the rent has to give their tenant a minimum of 90 days notice in writing. And it's actually more than that, as you will need to allow for delivery, and then it's going to apply to the next rent date following the 90 days. And so the process is as follows. The first rent review can only occur 12 months from the start of the tenancy. Now, I'm not sure if this is what the law intended, but following a technical reading of the legislation in 2016, a tribunal decided that the rent review and the change of rent were not the same. The process starts after 12 months and the change of rent is 90 plus days after that. So it is in month 16 in a tenancy before the rent actually changes. The Residential Tenancy Board agreed with this understanding, so you have to track from the review date and not the change of rent date. Here's another crucial point. Right now, the entire country is considered a rent pressure zone, or RPZ. This means the entire country is locked in until at least the 28th of February 2026. This means that any increase is legally capped at 2% or the rate of inflation, whichever is lower. So the 2% is not guaranteed. Now you understand how confusing this all is. So let's recap. It's basically you move in on or after the 11th of June 2022, then your tenancies automatically become unlimited after 6 months of occupation. If your tenancy began before that date, it will automatically flip to a new tenancy of unlimited duration at the end of its 6-year cycle. There are still technical questions around this, but we won't get into them today. Now, the bottom line is, tenants, your right to stay in the home is secure and unlimited by law. Certain circumstances like selling up allows the landlord secure possession. The rent review has to follow a strict formal 90-day notice procedure, and it is technical how it is applied. For landlords, that old 12-month lease model for setting the term and the rent is obsolete. So the tenancy is governed by law. The lease is a rule book, but it doesn't set the end date. These rules remain in place until the 28th of February 2026. After that, they are likely to change significantly again, so follow us and keep informed.